Hello dear students, welcome to NSM-LEARNING. We are discussing the poem Ode to a Nightingale. Today we shall discuss the sixth stanza of the poem. So the sixth stanza begins. Darkling I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death, called him soft name in many a mused rhyme, to take into the air my quiet breath. Now more than ever seems it a reach to die, to seize upon midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, and to thy high requiem become a sword. So, in this stanza we see the poet says, darkling I listen. The word darkling means in the dark. The short question may come, what does the word darkling mean in the poem Ode to a Nightingale? So the word darkling means in the dark. So in the dark I listen, I hear, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death. The poet listens to the sweet song of the nightingale in the world of the nightingale, which is dark. And of course, we all know the reason why the atmosphere, why the world of the nightingale is a dark one. It is discussed earlier. So in the dark, I listen to the sweet song of the nightingale, and for many a times I have been half in love with easeful death. So the poet says that many a times he was in love with death. He was in half love with death. That means he partially was ready to accept death. He wanted to leave the world and wanted to be a permanent resident of the unknown world, that is the world after death. Simply, he wanted to die. He wanted to leave the world unseen, because we all know that he is an escapist. He wants to leave the world. He wants to flee from the world because the cares, anxieties, sufferings and troubles of the earth actually made the poet feel in this way. That is why he wants to run away from a painful and troublesome world. So he says, I wanted to die. I was in love with death. For many a time, I was half in love with death. Means I wanted to die many times, but not completely. I was not completely ready to accept death to die. So he says, for many times I have been half in love with easeful death. Easeful death, the death that can be accepted easily. Easeful death, no painful death. Alright, easy death. I have been half in love with easy death. Called him soft names in many mused rhyme. I called death soft names. Tenderly, I requested him politely in many mused rhymes. Mused rhyme means meditated poetry. Rhymes means poetry. Mused means deeply meditated. That means the poetry which are the result of his deep meditation. It may also mean mused rhyme, that is meditated poetry, may also mean the poetry which were only thought, meditated, but not actually written. When he was lonely, when he thought deeply, and that deep meditation gave him a kind of feeling, then he preferred to die. So in that deep meditation, he wanted to die. He wanted to accept easeful death, many a time. So he says, I tenderly requested death to come upon me in many meditated rhymes. What did I request? I requested death to take into the air my quiet breath. To take into the air my quiet breath. I requested death to take away my breath, to take away my life so that I can die. I requested death to take into, means I requested death to mix, to melt my breath into the air and leave my body as an inanimate object. So I requested death many times in my meditated poetry to take into the air my quiet breath. But the difference is now more than ever seems it reached to die. Right now, in this moment, while I am listening to your song, sweet song, it gives me a special kind of feeling. I see that though I was in love, half in love, many times, but this is probably the ideal time for me to die. So the poet says that, but more than ever seems it reach to die, to seize upon midnight with no pain. In the middle of the night, if I seize, so seize means stop, stop breathing. If I stop my life, if I exit, if I die, if I be off, then that would be not at all painful. Why? Because I am right now listening to the sweet happy song of yours. I am right now excessively happy, and if I die in this very moment in the middle of the night while I am listening to your sweet song, then my death would totally be painless. I will receive no pain at all if I die in this very moment. So the poet considers that very moment while he is in the world of the nightingale in his imagination, and while he is listening to the sweet song of the nightingale, the poet considers that very moment to be the ideal time for death. So he says, but now more than ever seems it rich to die, to seize upon midnight with no pain. So I repeat the lines, try to understand. Darkling I listen. In the dark I am listening to the sweet song of the nightingale, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death. I was in favor of death. I was in love with death halfly many a time. Called him soft names in many mused rhymes. In my meditated poetry, deeply thought poetry, means in my deep meditation, in my imagination, I called him, I invited death to come upon me softly, gently, called him soft names in many mused rhyme. I requested him to take into the air my quiet breath, to take away my breath and made me die. But now, more than ever seems it is to die. But this very moment I consider is the perfect moment. But now more than ever seems it reach to die, to seize upon midnight with no pain. If I die in the middle of the night, if I stop my life, then my death would be an easy one. It would be an easeful death. It would be not at all painful. And of course, I truly want to die because the world gives me a lot of troubles. I want to escape from all these troubles. So more than ever seems it now, but now more than ever seems it reach to die, to seize upon midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. So in this very moment, what are you doing? Why this I think to be the ideal moment, perfect moment for my death? Because in this very moment, while thou art pouring forth, so art is the archaic form of art, while thou art pouring forth, you are expressing thy soul abroad, while you are expressing, you are exposing, you are pouring out the utmost happiness of your soul in your song. So he says, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad, you are pouring out the happiness of your soul, the happiness of your heart, and you are doing this with your sweet song in the dead of the night, in the world of the nightingale, in your world of the forest, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. And you are doing it easily, you are doing it out of excessive joy, you are doing it joyfully. So your excessive joy you are pouring out in your song, and that song gives me a kind of delight, excessive delight, that causes me feel the moment to be an ideal moment for my death. While thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy, still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, and to thy high requiem become a sort. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain. Now here the poet speaks of the probability. What would happen if the poet dies? The nightingale would not stop singing. It will of course continue its song. But the situation would be of course a different one. The nightingale would not stop singing though the poet dies, but this very happy song, joyful song, that would be changed into a requiem, that would be changed into a funeral song, because the poet would die, and if the poet dies, then the sweet song of the nightingale would be changed into a sad song, funeral song, which he would sing because of the death of the poet John Keats. So he says, if I die, you will not stop your song, you will continue your song, but the purpose of song would be changed. You are singing now a happy joyful song, this very song would be then transformed into a sad requiem, funeral song, and the effect of your song to my ears would be nothing. I have ears in vain. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain. To thy high requiem become a sort. You will stop. You will not stop singing. You will continue your song. I will have my ears. Of course, I will have my ears, because as soon as I die, my ears will not be spoiled. But what the ears will lost is the power of listening, because the power of feeling, sense would not be there anymore in my ears if I die. So my ears then would be as insensitive, as lifeless as the sod. Sod means the clay, the clay of earth. The clay, it is of course an inanimate object having no effect to the sweet song of the nightingale. So if I die, then my dead body would only be left, and my physical ear would be there, but my ears will lose the power of listening, they will lost their feeling. So the effect of your song to my ear would be as useless as to a clod of earth. So I have ears in vain. These would be of no use if I die, and they would serve as what? Clod of earth. As a cloud of earth, they have no life, inanimate object. They have no sense, no power of listening. The same thing can be compared to my ears after my death. So he says, still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, and to thy high requiem become a sort. So we see that in this stanza, the poet, one thing that he wanted to emphasize is the permanence of the song of the nightingale. Of course, he would continue this very theme in the next stanza. But here we see that though the poet will die, the nightingale will not stop singing. It will continue its song, but the effect of the song to the poet would be no more, and the purpose of the song would be then changed. Now it is a happy and joyful song which he happily sings, and then it would be a mournful song, funeral song, that he would continue singing after the death of the poet. And the poet's ear will have lost the power of listening, and they would be as insensitive as the clod of earth. So we see that firstly, in the beginning of the stanza, the poet emphasizes the theme of escapism. He wanted to escape the world. He earlier also said that he wanted to leave the world unseen, and here again we see he repeated the idea. He says that I wanted to die many times. I was in love with easeful death, and I expressed that kind of feeling in many a meditated rhymes. But though I was auctionally, several times I was in love with death, but all the time that was my partial love with death. But this very time I am completely in love with death. So he says that while in this middle of the night, while thou art pouring forth the ecstasy, the happiness of your soul, you are spreading abroad, you are pouring out. In that very moment, while I am listening to your sweet song, it gives me such kind of pleasure that it seems, this very moment seems to be the ideal, perfect, best moment for me to die, comparatively much more better than the earlier times while I was half in love with death. So this is how we see that the poet wanted to leave the world. He wanted to escape from this unhappy world of humanity, of human world, and he wanted to be a part of the imaginary world of the nightingale. That is, he wants to die. This is how the sixth stanza of the poem ends. Now the short questions that may come from this stanza is that the very first is, what does the word darkling mean? Darkling means in the dark. And secondly, the poet says mused rhyme, very important. Mused rhyme, what did he actually mean by mused rhyme? So the answer should be mused rhymes. Actually, he wanted to mean by this mused rhyme meditated poetry, the poetry which were deeply thought but not actually given any written form. Then another important thing is that requiem. What does the word requiem mean? The word requiem means a funeral song which is sung while a dead body is carried to the burial ground. So I would like to stop this video here, and in the next video we shall start the seventh stanza of the poem. Thank you. So dear students,